Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Counselor's Office. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor, and we are talking about Destiny 2 in the Counselor's Office. Today, we are talking specifically about Liminality, the Lime Strike. That's right. Which, I'm going to preference before we get anywhere in the video. A lot of people might be upset by my takes and my thoughts. Listen, we're brutally honest here in the Counselor's Office. I just want to make it very clear that when we're talking about difficulty does not equate to like whether I like the strike or not, right? I like the strike. I think it's really cool. It's neat. I like the lore implications. I enjoy it. It's fun. It's fun. Okay, well, let's get that out there. But today we're going to try to be a little objective, talking specifically about the challenge, and more so also leading into Grandmasters in general, not just this one specifically. But do I think Liminality is what Bungie has hyped it up to be? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, here's the clip that everyone and their brother saw before the final shape came out and hyped this all up. So let's look at it.
I want this strike to be the hardest strike we ever made. I want people to scream and cry over this strike.
Oh no!
And just say, how do I complete this strike on Grandmaster difficulty? And I'll be like, yes.
Yeah, those are pretty big expectations. I know I've seen people in the comments of like Twitter trying to argue and try to give excuse. So, well, what they said is, they didn't say it was going to be, that they want it to be. Like, wanting versus whether it is definitely two different things. But when you are making something and you're making these statements that you're wanting this to be the hardest, that means your intent is to make something hard. Now, is this the hardest strike or the hardest GM we've had? I'm going to say no. I'm sorry. Even if you want to take power level and like the fact that Guardians are strong and prismatic, you want to take it out of that bubble. I'm going to tell you, I still don't think this was the hardest. I'm going to be honest. And I'm not going to go piece by piece going over each encounter. I'm going to have a video for the whole run and kind of giving tips and stuff and thoughts, all that separate. This is just specifically on the bigger picture of whether this is the hardest strike or not. There's a lot of encounters that you have a lot of enemies and it can get dicey. Let's get that clear. This is still a Grandmaster. You can be very strong, but if you mess up or you get overly cocky, you can die, you can wipe, your team can die and wipe. It is still challenging in the sense that it's still Grandmaster. You're like imagine Dark Souls or any other game where you build a glass cannon character. You're really strong, you can hit hard, but everything can hit you hard as well. And that's exactly what you should expect in a Grandmaster. You are literally a glass cannon, which we'll get into whether we think that's a good way of making Grandmasters in general or not. But in the world we live in, we're a glass cannon. In times past, was that the case? No, I mean, we're more of like a glass tank. Like, really? If you think back in some of the past Grandmasters we've had, like, I'm going to use Proving Grounds a lot. In the Proving Grounds, there was the hangar area with a bunch of tanks and enemies and champions all in one area. Like, you were hit right in the face. And it was almost required that you had 2 Titans and a Warlock, 2 banners with Furiosa, and then a Well-Lock. That was like required when that Grandmaster came out because people struggled. People couldn't do it. Like, Hunters going invisible was fine, but people still struggled and needed to literally sit there. And people spent 40 to like an hour doing those strats. And I'm not here talking about whether people have skill issues or, man, I can't believe that I did it in 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Listen, I'm saying in the broader spectrum of the community, in that time, that's kind of what it was. It was challenging. People thought it was hard. And we were not at the level of prismatic where you essentially are a glass cannon. We've kind of shifted with the nerfs to bubble, like how things have changed since then is we've gone away from being less defensive to more, I can have pockets of moment where I just throw everything dies, and then I'm going to just kind of sit in the back and let everything cook, like my super and my transference and my abilities. Like I can sit back here and then I can get aggressive and then I'm going to pull back, get aggressive and pull back. And it's easy to do that, especially when you have knowledge of encounters, which is moving on to the big thing about difficulty with Liminality. Liminality is going like every other Grandmaster, where it starts out where it's hard because you don't know how to do it, or at least you've done the base strike and you've gone in and you don't know where the champions are. You don't know how many extra ads maybe Bungie's added. What if they added subjugators, if they've added Hive Guardians, which they've done all of that, by the way. If you're curious, watch the video that I've done it. And yeah, I mean, that does add challenge when you don't understand something. But like, it's just like Dark Souls. People struggle with Dark Souls or complain about Dark Souls being too hard. I know there was a whole thing about the Elden Ring DLC, and people are like, this is too hard. And yes, there's situations that people point out, yeah, it's kind of, the mechanics is kind of stupid. Even so, that the developer of Elden Ring rolled back some nerfs to some things and fixed a few issues because some bosses were like overly egregious. That's not necessarily the case in Destiny. I mean, there's obviously bugs and stuff like that. But in the case of Dark Souls and Elden Ring, once you understand how a boss or mechanics work, you're able to navigate that. You're able to min-max. You're able to have a build that can literally clown on that mechanic, that encounter. And that's why you see people beating bosses at level 1. They know when to dodge. They know when to block. They know when to hop or whatever. They know when to attack. They know what kind of build to specifically go into to hit like a glass cannon at level 1. Like, these people know what to do because they spend so much time. And Grandmasters, when you have the same Grandmasters over and over and over and over and over again every season or every other season, like how many times have we've done Disgraced or the Devil's Lair or Fallen Saber? Like Fallen Saber, I just casually did in 13 minutes without like really like thinking much about it. I threw a build that I just want to play with. It wasn't even like a meta build, and we did it in 13 minutes. I did Disgraced, which is remastered from D1 Strike, and I did it with my clan, and we were sitting there arguing about the final shape and whether it's, you know, I'm not going to go into it in this video because I'm going to make people mad, but watch that video if you want to know what we're arguing about. We spent like 13 minutes on that, and I literally died because I wasn't paying attention. I was more focused on the conversation than the Grandmaster, and that's how easy it is. It's like once you know you have that knowledge, everything's easy. Like it's easy, and that's the same thing with this one. Like I went in blind, and I will admit I went in blind, and there was something like I've done the strike, but I didn't know where the champions and all that stuff. Like that's another thing. Bungie relies heavily on champions. They just, difficulty is for them is just spamming champions. But again, knowledge. Yes, you may not know where a champion is, but when you know how to deal with a champion, they're some of the easiest enemies you can deal with. Like champions are a joke in Destiny. They're a joke. It's so disappointing that is Bungie's go-to to make things difficult is add more champions. Now, in Grandmasters, you kind of need champions because they also give you tokens, and tokens let you continue on. If they removed all champions or made less champions, then you would be struggling more. Maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe less champions and more struggle because you have to actually play your life versus I've killed 30 champions. I have 20 plus lives. That there's times where we kill champions so much that we can just die freely because we have so many extra tokens. And that is a problem with the design of Grandmasters, is that some of them have so many champions because Bungie again thinks that's challenge that you just die and you're like, oh, okay, well, res me, we got 20 tokens. I know there's a timer like 40 minutes, but very rarely do you ever get near 40 minutes for most teams. I know that might be elitist take for some people, but Liminality, like you get enough mixture of champions that I don't think lives were much of a problem for us. I think the most challenging part of Liminality is, like I said, knowledge, understanding the mechanic. Like there is the Amakara skulls that you have to go into the two tunnels twice. There's the first part where you first see the boss, and you have to go to the two rooms. One is literally a speed run with the lava closing in, and you have to go through. That's really cool, by the way. I like that. Like that is challenging because I've messed that up, even though I know how to do it. It changes positions, and you have to maneuver out. The right side is you have to shoot all the little taken eyeballs, and you're platforming up to the top, and you have to do 3 sets of eyeballs, and you get out. That's fine too. But once you know how that works, like obviously where to run is always changing, but once you know the strats of like, oh, well, I don't want to jump over, I need to go slide under or go to the side because it's faster than jumping, but I just want to speed run. Once you do that, it's pretty easy. Once you know where the eyeballs spawn in the other room, it's easy. Even the boss, you go to one side, you pick up the taken ball, and you have to shoot more blights or the little eyeballs. And when you know where they're going to spawn, you can pre-shoot like boop, 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 boop. And you could do it so fast. And that's the thing. Like I said, knowledge is key. And once you know, it kind of takes away some of the challenge out of it. And that's the thing with Liminality. Once people really understand, they're probably going to be able to speed run this. Like I've seen people do 24 on their first run. I did 36 and then went down, I think, to 30 in my second run. And that was me not like min-max, no comms. That's another thing. If you can do a Grandmaster with no comms, with random LFG, then I know for a fact it is not the hardest. If you want to say that something is the hardest, you need comms. Like there's certain encounters in Destiny where you cannot do it without communication. Even texting, you still need comms. Those are the kind of challenges that you need in a Grandmaster that we don't have. And is that just, oh, it's because the Guardians are too strong? We'll get to that in a minute. The boss room. I do want to make note that the boss room, the reason why the boss room is usually the bread and butter for encounters. It makes a break whether something's going to be hard or something's going to be easy. When I think of difficulty, like, oh, wow, I think of Light Blade. When people first did the Light Blade GM, him spamming balls from across the map is nasty. When him hopping and following you and slamming down, like constantly having to focus on the boss, and you have areas to hide, but not like a lot. Now, obviously, there's a cheese to abuse him jumping, but before people figured out you can cheese him, people were running around trying to avoid being killed by him. And then you had champions spawn in the middle of that. And you're like, oh my God. Like, it was hard. People wiped at the boss multiple times. I've never wiped at the Liminality. I literally went in, I did 3 runs. The first time we wiped, it was because of, what do we wipe to? It was because of the city area. I did not realize where the lava was spawning and where it raised. And so we all got cooked. Or at least I got cooked, and then other people got killed by the dread up top. Once you realize you can hide to the far side where the buildings are, and the dread can't immediately kill you, snipers can't kill you, and enemies just spawn near you, and you can chain kill everything. Once you realize that, you make a bunch of orbs, and you got recuperation just healing you nonstop. You got rifts, all that stuff. Once you realize that encounter is easy. The boss, like I said, Light Blade was hard. Proving Grounds, you had only one area you could hide, and that was in the back. But even then, the hiding was only good for like him throwing the fireballs at you. But then once you did enough damage, he puts up a shield. You are forced to have to move up and engage. And that was terrifying because hitting the stupid shield was challenging. You had to put a lot of shots in it. You had to worry about the boss killing you. You had to worry about his balls killing you. And don't make jokes there. But yes, he will throw the fireballs at you and you could die. It was challenging because you also had unstops that would bum rush you. So you had to worry about the boss. You had to worry about unstops. A lot of people, again, were running dual Titan. There wasn't anywhere to really hide, and you had to be able to navigate. You had to be able to fight the boss and the ads in this room with not much cover. Granted, is there more enemies in the Liminality boss fight? Yeah, maybe I don't know. Like sometimes yes, if when they all spawn, but once you clear them out, I think dealing with them is a lot easier than the Cabal because Cabal hit really hard, especially if Arc and whatnot. And then the final stand, if we're comparing final stands, the final stand you have to go up where the boss is, and he just stomps you and kills you multiple times in the proving ground. Whereas the final stand, like the final bar for Liminality, it's not that hard. He does get aggressive, like the Tormentor does get aggressive, but honestly, there is so much cover in that room. You can kite him. Like once he aggroes someone, you communicate. The other two people can clear ads in the room, the boss room. And that one person just kites the attacks. You can literally have all his attacks, which do big damage numbers, but you can just have him attack the pillars, like hide behind a pillar, shoot his crit or his stomach once you get the final stand. And then he rotates. Like he's aggressive. He will follow you, but he's easy to avoid versus the final boss, Proving Grounds and Light Blade. When it first came out, you couldn't do that. You couldn't necessarily cheese him, at least until people figured out the mechanics. Obviously, people figured out Proving Grounds. You can go to the top and glitch out of the map, and people are willing to glitch out in order to cheese the boss. Same thing with Lightfall. Light Blade, I mean, people were willing to do the hop, jumping down to cheese them, and they'll probably still do that. But I didn't feel like I had to do any cheesy strats with this encounter. Like with Liminality and the Tormentor, I didn't feel like I had to cheese it. I didn't feel like I had to have, outside of maybe Song of Flame to just kind of make killing certain things easier, because a Hive Guardian can spawn and you want to deal with that. A Subjugator does spawn and you have to deal with that. But outside of that, was like once those were gone, I felt like the room is pretty manageable. Like the only time I felt like we were in danger is when two of us weren't paying attention or died, and then it was one of us. Like, because then you're like, okay, well, I'm a glass house. If I get hit, I could die. Versus when you're three of you are spread out killing ads, and the boss is ping-ponging around because he doesn't know who to go to. It makes that encounter trivial. I truly do not think this is hard at all. And again, I know that might be elitist for a lot of people. Like, oh my God, I can't believe you're so elitist. I struggled. I wiped so many times. But when you're comparing this to even if you're taking what power level, I don't think even if we didn't have prismatic or we weren't as strong, like solar wasn't so strong, we didn't have healing, I still think this would have been very easy, specifically because you can still play very passive. A lot of these encounters, like you can hide, you can play backwards, you can use old fashioned of going invisible, you can avoid a lot of things. It is really, there's a lot more flexibility versus like in other encounters, like I said, Proving Ground, you are shoved in a place of uncomfortability where you have no choice. You have to face off. There's no hiding. There's no, I can get out of jail free card. I can hide around the corner or use this pillar. No, it's like you do or you die in like the Proving Ground when it came out. And a lot of people died, and people were like, must have Titan, must have whereas here you can pretty much use whatever you want. I don't think this Grandmaster requires any specific class, if I'm being very honest. So do I think this is hard? Absolutely not. This branches off to the final section of this video that I want to talk about. Liminality really indicates a bigger problem with Grandmasters in general. I think the glass cannon, could you nerf Guardians? Yes, but would that actually make things challenging? No, because guns are strong, so you would have to nerf guns, and then people will be upset because people want to feel strong. Could they introduce more mechanics like the Amakara skull runs on the side rooms? Yes, I think that's great because it makes you have to navigate and use your brain versus just throw ability spam. But my biggest thing is they need to stop. Like right now, challenge in Destiny is lower level champions or modifiers, right? Modifiers, you do less damage. You do more champions. You take more incoming damage. Like that's challenge. I would like to see situations where You know, I don't have the actual answer, but I would like to see situations where we're not just facing off against champions nonstop. Like, we have less lives because we have less champions, but we have more impactful mini bosses, right? Imagine instead of where champions are, we have subjugators. Like, subjugators are challenging, or tormentors, or just unique bosses or mini bosses in general that are new and fresh, and they add to Grandmasters. Like, Hive Guardians are fantastic. Yes, you can kill them, but they are also just as much of a glass house as you. Like, you can kill them fast, but they can kill you really fast, especially when they pop supers. Like, it's terrifying. Having a Hive Guardian throw their shield that ping pongs across the map and just kills 3 of you at once, which has happened in the past. I've had that's terrifying. And that's the kind of stuff that we need challenge-wise. Power is one thing. Our abilities is one thing. But how the Grandmaster is set up is a different thing. Quantity doesn't always equal quality. I think more ads is fantastic, but I think mechanics is a big thing of why Grandmasters are not hard. I don't think you're ever going to overcome the fact that once people understand mechanics, obviously it's going to make things easy. But for like a first time experience, I think relying heavily on champions, which is what this Grandmaster does, is it has a bunch of champions. I would have liked to see something fresh, something unique, a twist on Grandmasters. Maybe different modifiers. You know, it's not just we get surges, we do more damage with this ability, but we see this thing where we periodically have half health, or I don't know, maybe that's too much, but I feel like something unique needs to be done. Again, I don't have the answers. I'm not a developer, but I am saying that just weakening Guardians and throwing champions, that's not going to work. It's not working. It's not challenging. Like I said, again, Proving Grounds, it itself did not do anything spectacular when it comes to just champions or changing how Guardians are, like weakening them. It put us in a very uncomfortable situation where it negated a lot of strategies. The encounters itself was challenging because it was challenging. Being forced to face off one-on-one versus a boss in trash ads, and you did not have any hiding. Like, look at the Dreaming City dungeon, Shattered Throne. That boss gave so many people struggles for the first time because they didn't understand it. And it's such a small room, there's not a lot of places to hide. You were forced to have to square up and deal with, especially if you're doing solo flawless. Obviously, if a group, it's different. But solo flawless, like, you have to square up. You have to feel confident in how you handle the trash ads, handle the bosses, the knights. Like, you also have a time limit to get the buffs to do damage. Like, you were forced in, again, an uncomfortable situation. Liminality, I don't think it does a good job at forcing us in uncomfortable situations where it forces a challenge. Again, I might be spitting out my butt, but I'm just saying Bungie is starting to become predictable with how they change things. Like, if you play a base strike, you get the base feel of it. Most of what changes is your level goes down, things do more damage to you, you're a glass house, and they just throw champions. Champions. And that's all that changes. Nothing unique actually changes. And I get it. They don't have time to make like classic D1 prestige where it has like special things. But imagine if you do a Grandmaster and they force you to do a challenge. Like, there's an actual challenge in there that's different. Like, one Guardian has to do this in order you do this. Or they add, like, imagine that. I'm just saying, imagine you had to do a special challenge. I'm trying to think of a challenge that you would have to do. Like, say they made a new strike and you had residences. Like, from Salvation to Edge, you had to collect residences. You have to shoot the totems. Imagine you had to do one challenge where you can't pick up the same resident shape twice, or another Guardian has to do it. So you have to pair off. You had to coordinate and work together to move forward because the challenge locks you out from doing that normally. I don't know. I'm just spitballing some concepts, some ideas from like some of the raid challenges, how they could import that into Grandmasters, creating unique challenges. Now, would that obviously it would be solved and people would do it easily? Yes, but it would be an extra feature that would be mechanic based versus here's champion. And that's where I'm at. I know I'm starting to ramble, so I'm going to wrap up there. You can let me know. I know this might be such an elitist take for some of y'all, like, man, I'm struggling. But for some of you, you're in the same boat as me. Like, yeah, I just found a team on LFG and just knocked it out first, or we wiped one time and we knocked it out the second time. Like, I feel like if Bungie wants something to be the hardest, it's not just necessarily nerf Guardians. They need to do something different. There's a reason why people struggle on Salvation's Edge 4th encounter. Is it because the Guardians are nerfed or because it's a lot of champions? No, it's because it's the mechanics that make people struggle. They have to do something new and fresh, unique. And I get that they're not going to do that for every strike or every Grandmaster because Grandmasters is a niche thing. But you could say the same thing about raids. Raids are also niche compared to the overall population because it shows that like 80, 60, I don't know, there's like 60 to 80% of people have not in the community don't do raids. I don't have the numbers, so don't quote me on that, but I know I've read that somewhere. But in overall, we can assess and say in general, there is a larger population that doesn't do raids because of having to play with other people or having to communicate because they have to get out of their bubble, or the fact that they feel like it's challenging and they can't do it. Again, Grandmasters, when it comes to all the other Grandmasters, take away the power of the Guardian and just looking from encounter and what you have to do and engage with and the situational areas. I do not think Liminality is at all the hardest. I truly believe there are other areas that are much like other Grandmasters that are, or even strikes in general, that are more challenging, that requires you to do more. Whereas this one is pretty easy outside of the Amakara runs. Outside of that, you're just asked to kill ads and survive. And that's pretty simple to do. I'm Mr. Gaming Counselor. Hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel for more hot takes and brutally honest opinions. As always, game out. Huzzah.